Hello, this is Dana Andrews, and today I'm presenting the 22nd segment of the Master the Bible Today series, a snapshot of the book of 1 Samuel. It was written probably by Samuel, but also includes writings from the prophets Nathan and Gad. The purpose of the book of 1 Samuel is to record the life of Samuel, who was Israel's last judge, the reign and decline of Saul, their first king, and the choice and preparation of David, Israel's greatest king. The book begins in the days of the judges and describes Israel's desire to transition from a theocracy, which means being led by the all-powerful one and only God, to a monarchy led by a king. Establishing a monarchy did not solve Israel's problems. What God desires is the genuine devotion of each person's mind and heart to Him. No government, political party, or set of laws can substitute for the rule of God in your heart and life. Israel prospered as long as the people regarded God as their true king. When the leaders strayed from God's law, God intervened in their personal lives and overruled their actions. In this way, God maintained ultimate control over Israel's history. God is always at work in this world and in control, even when we cannot see what He is doing. No matter what kinds of pressures we must endure or how many changes we must face, God is ultimately in control of our situation. Being confident of God's sovereignty, we can face the difficult situations in our lives with boldness. 1 Samuel is a book of great beginnings and tragic endings. It begins with Eli as high priest during the time of the judges. As a religious leader, Eli certainly must have begun his life with a close relationship with God. In his communication with Hannah, a great woman who loved and prayed to God, and in his training with her son Samuel, Eli demonstrated a clear understanding of God's purposes and call. But his life ended in public shame because of his sons, who showed a significant lack of respect for him and for God, even though they were priests. We see a vivid contrast between the young Samuel and Eli's sons. Eli's sons were selfish, but Samuel was helpful. Eli's sons defrauded people, but Samuel grew in wisdom and gave the people messages from God. As an adult, Samuel became a prophet, priest, and judge over Israel. Please note how a person's actions reflects his or her character. Unfortunately, this was true not only of Eli's sons, but Samuel's sons too, who also turned away from God. It can also be true of us. We need to strive, like Samuel, to keep our heart pure before God. When Samuel became old, and because his sons did not follow God, the people asked him to appoint a king to lead them, like the nations around them. This troubled Samuel, and he took his concern to God. Though it was against his original purpose, God chose a king for them. God responded to Samuel with one of the key verses in 1 Samuel in chapter 8, verses 7 and 9. Quote, "And the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do." Unquote. And Samuel did what God told him to do. Remember, this snapshot of the book of 1 Samuel also briefly talks about Saul and David. Now, Eli's, who trained Samuel's, death marked the decline of the influence of the priesthood and the rise of the prophets in Israel. Remember, Samuel was dedicated as a young child to God's service by his mother Hannah, and he became one of Israel's greatest prophets. He was a man of prayer who finished the work of the judges, began the school of the prophets, and anointed Israel's first king. Saul was anointed by Samuel as the first king. Saul started quickly. He was a handsome figure and a humble man, and was God's choice as Israel's first king. His early reign was marked by leadership and bravery. But unfortunately, he not only disobeyed God, he became jealous and paranoid, evil, and finally had his kingship taken away from him by God. Saul's life continued steadily downward. He became obsessed with killing David, who God appointed as his successor, and who was Israel's greatest king. Saul turned to witchcraft by consulting a medium and finally committed suicide. David was another great beginner, a man who followed God. David ministered to Saul, killed Goliath, and became a great warrior. But we will have to wait until the book of 2 Samuel to see how David finished. For God, quote, to obey is better than sacrifice, unquote, chapter 15, verse 22. God wants his people to obey, serve, and follow him with a whole heart, rather than to maintain a superficial commitment based on tradition or ceremonial systems. Although we are free from the sacrificial system of the Jewish law, we too often still rely on outward observances to substitute for inward commitment. God desires that all our work and worship be motivated by genuine, heartfelt devotion to him. God faithfully kept the promises he made to Israel. He responded to his people with tender mercy and swift justice. In showing mercy, he faithfully acted in the best interest of his people. In showing justice, he was faithful to his word and perfect moral nature. Because God is faithful, he can be counted on to be merciful toward us. Yet God is also just, and he will not tolerate rebellion against him. His faithfulness and unselfish love should inspire us to dedicate ourselves to him completely. We must never take his loving mercy for granted. So please, read the interesting, true history in 1 Samuel and be enlightened by its passages and helped by its truths. As you read 1 Samuel, note the transition from theocracy to monarchy. Exalt in the classic stories of David and Goliath, David and Jonathan, David and Abigail, and watch the rise of the influence of the prophets. But in the midst of reading all the history and adventure, determine to run your race as God's person from start to finish. Thank you.